If you click this video, I'm guessing you already know what Jubilee Surrounded is. They've had on some of the biggest political commentators from both the right and the left, and I've been lucky enough to be on a few episodes now. So I wanted to go over my experience of what these people are really like face to face, and also the thought process I had going into each video. Specifically, I've spoken to Ben Shapiro, Lila Rose, Candace Owens, and most recently Cenk Uygur, all of whom are extremely different, and pretty much with every single conversation, I went into it with a totally different goal in mind. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys are liking and subscribing, and I also have all my other links down in the description below. First, we have Ben Shapiro, and my goal here was stay focused, because his number one weapon is that he's going to try to change the topic. Not entirely. He's going to tangentially stay related to what you're talking about, but he's going to pivot to whataboutisms, what about all these Democrats that did X, Y, and Z, and then he's going to bring up examples that obfuscate the main point and try to derail what you're trying to get across to him. I know this because I'd already spoken to him when he came and gave a speech on my college campus.
I think you said that Trump he would destroy the social fabric or something along those lines in 2016. You said in 2020 the damage had already been done, so you were okay supporting him, and then after that he's obviously done a lot more damage to the social fabric. So where do you stand on that?
What the right will do very often is they'll say, I don't even understand why the left is making a big deal out of election now. You guys were calling Stacey Abrams the governor of Georgia for years on end. Right? We did 4 years if Donald Trump was elected in 2016 because of Russian collusion that never materialized. Right? Like so this game can be played on all sides.
So staying focused and staying on point and dragging him back to the main topic repeatedly was my mindset here. And it ended up being the right mindset to have, although in hindsight, the thing that I left out is be more aggressive. Don't be so charitable and don't be so nice. There are a few things I took away from my conversation with him. Watching it back, it's so clear to me that he was debating me in bad faith. And I think this was specifically the case with the topic we were discussing.
I want to lay out a case for you and why I think that Schedule F, which is what Trump implemented towards the end of his first term, could be used to, what you were saying, erode our institutions in this country.
The most these conservative commentators are really ever allowed to say about Trump is like, yeah, that wasn't really the best thing he did. He was kind of rude there. I would have done it differently. But they're never allowed to say that Trump crossed a red line. They're never allowed to say that he's actually dangerous in some way. It's important to know, Ben Shapiro went to law school, but if you watch our conversation, you would not be mistaken to think that he has no understanding of even the most basic civics.
And then when the Supreme Court actually said you're not allowed to do that, he said, I found a way to go around that and try to do that again. You know,
Sure.
there's a clever, I would say that, let's put it this way. I think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are much cleverer about the ways they expand executive power than Donald Trump, who's a blunderbuss when it comes to his attempts to expand executive power.
When you talk about the student loan thing, again, this is an example of Biden trying to do something, the court saying you can't do it, him saying, okay, I won't do it that way, I'll do it a different way. And if that way was found to be unconstitutional, the Supreme Court would strike that down as well.
And it's frustrating to watch back because in the moment, I'm explaining to a Harvard graduate what judicial review is and that, hey, if Biden does something and the court says no, he can use different legal avenues to effectuate the same outcome. That's not defying a court order. You should know this. And he did know that. He knew everything I was saying and he still pretended not to, which is why out of all the people on this list, I think Ben Shapiro is the most bad faith actor because although he was very, very nice to us off camera, probably the nicest person out of all these political commentators, he seems like a good dad, seems like a good husband. He has no integrity. He might criticize Trump a little bit here and there, but he will never call Trump an authoritarian. He told me that, well, okay, JD Vance might have said that he wants Trump to defy the courts, but don't you know that Democrats want to change the number of Supreme Court justices by going through the Congress, which is actually all three branches of government working together to do something, which is like not at all what I'm talking about.
And then he's trying to actually, get rid of the filibuster and then add justices to the Supreme Court in response.
And I shouldn't have to spell this out in this video. I should not have had to spell it out to his face because Ben Shapiro knows more about law than I do. He has a law degree. And I honestly think that if time hadn't run out, I would have been able to pin him down on this issue. Because first he starts out by saying that Trump's not really going to do that. Then when I establish Trump is going to do that, he says, okay, well, Democrats actually do worse stuff. And then when I establish no, what Trump is doing is a whole different order of magnitude, then he goes, actually, no, if you go back to the times of Andrew Jackson, court orders were kind of defied once.
Like you can say that's an issue, but it's just not on the same level of importance or severity as the chief executive saying, oh, Supreme Court said I can't do that. I'm just.
I mean, first of all, we do have a history in this country of that sort of thing happening. I mean, the tariff of nullifications in the 1830s with regard to Andrew Jackson, for example,
right.
and their tariff of abominations, rather.
By the end of it, he is just saying, I'm okay with him defying court orders. There's precedent for that, which is a huge leap from where he started the conversation. Overall, I have to give him an F here because I don't think he was particularly effective rhetorically. I think his arguments fell flat, and I think he was debating without integrity and debating in bad faith. Next, we have Lila Rose, and this was a very different ballgame than the Ben Shapiro one because that one was like conservative versus Democrats. This one was a very specific topic of abortion. And as much as I disagree with Lila Rose, this is her thing. And so she's also heard a lot of pro-choice arguments and she has rebuttals ready to go. So with this one, the main focus was just understand the subject matter as coherently as possible and understand her position. What types of rebuttals can I expect from her? And then how can I preemptively diffuse those before she says them? And here I think, again, obviously I'm biased, I think I did a good job because I was arguing that personhood only begins when you have the capacity for consciousness. And the question she always asked as a follow-up that I'd seen her ask dozens of times before was, what if someone's asleep? What if they're in a coma? Which led me down the interesting path of actually researching a little bit of neuroscience before I went on this episode.
So if someone is unconscious, are they no longer a human?
They still have connections with their thalamus and cortex, whether they're under general anesthesia, whether they're asleep, whether
if
they're in a coma.
You would say they're still a human.
They still have the neural pathways connecting those parts of the brain.
Another thing she always asks people is that, are you saying before that point you can do anything to it? And that's where also I preempted that by having a different stance than I guess the people she's talked to before, which is that just because a fetus before that isn't a person doesn't mean it has zero value. And as I told her in my conversation with her,
if 200 years in the future, thanks to like medical technology advancements, we can safely remove an 8-week fetus from a mother, respect her bodily autonomy, and protect the fetus, I don't think anyone's going to call for abortion in that situation. But the reality is, respecting her bodily autonomy typically is mutually exclusive with keeping that pregnancy.
And I don't think she's ever heard that argument before. I will give her more credit than Ben Shapiro here. Lila Rose, as much as I think she was wrong, she was arguing what she thinks is true, which it seems like Shapiro doesn't do that, right? Like, he expresses an opinion he thinks he's supposed to have. Although when it comes to being bad faith, when I went up the second time, she did do something extremely bad faith.
I think you're arguing from a position of what I would call ableism. You're saying that until that person has these certain...
She tried to bring this argument of like, oh, you think that if someone is like disabled or something, that we should be able to abort them because they're not as smart as the average person, which tries to conflate the consciousness argument with an intelligence argument, which is like ability. Whether or not you are disabled, you are conscious. She brought up an edge case of people that are born with pretty much only a brainstem. But again, I already answered this earlier when I told her if there's no conflict between the bodily autonomy of the mother and this other potential partial person, then there's no real reason to end the life.
Who does my definition exclude?
If you let me finish, you're saying that until that person,
you're making an accusation.
You're excluding people who have the active capacity for certain abilities. And I'm saying,
give me
if
a
you
type
have
of
a
person that is not encompassed by my definition.
Well, the baby with anencephaly or hydrocephaly, we were talking about them earlier.
But do you remember what I said earlier as well? If someone's born with anencephaly, there's no conflict there between the bodily autonomy of a woman.
I don't know if she forgot that or she felt like she had to ignore it to win the point, but that was something that I thought was pretty bad faith from her. Overall, though, I would give her a C+, because I think she was wrong, but I think she was arguing somewhat honestly, and she was pretty nice off camera, like Ben was too. She wasn't being, disrespectful to anyone or trying to get like a one-up on us when the cameras weren't rolling. Next, we have Candace Owens. And going into this, I had a totally different mindset than what I did for both Ben and Lila, because I've never really seen her honestly engage with the argument of an opponent. She is always just posturing for her audience. With her, it's all rhetoric, and she is good at rhetoric, to be fair to her. So my preparation here was not like, how do I structurally dismantle her arguments? It was, how do I win on rhetoric? Because when you look at her main strategy in debates, she tries to make her opponent look ridiculous. And her whole thing is like, do you guys see how silly this lib is? And then she kind of gives these weird, exaggerated versions of their argument. And when someone debates like that, you don't debate them in good faith. If you do that, you're being dumb. And that means being very pedantic also about her prompt.
We live under a matriarchy, not a patriarchy.
And I know she would love nothing more than to debate this term of patriarchy. It's a buzzword in online political circles, and she has a whole host of talking points associated with it. So I didn't take the bait. My logic was, you're saying we live in a matriarchy, I'm going to put you on the defensive. You're making an affirmative claim. Now I'm going to explain why I think you're wrong, rather than going up and debating, do we live in a patriarchy, which I think is such a loaded term that means so many different things to different people that I wasn't sure if it was really worth having that conversation with her. Meaning my main goal here wasn't even to prove any feminist theory or anything. It's just to prove that women are not the dominant members of society. They don't run society. And when there exist structural barriers to women being prosperous, I don't know what kind of matriarchy would set up that kind of system.
I think even you'd agree that on a global level, that's obviously ridiculous when there are countries where people literally are honor killed for like Instagram posts. But even if we're talking about just the US, right? We don't have paid maternity leave. Abortion is illegal in over a dozen different states. And as someone earlier was mentioning, women are overwhelmingly the victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. So that doesn't seem like a very well-designed matriarchy.
And as I expected, she didn't really engage with my argument in any serious way.
Where is the government getting money from? This is
tax revenue. I mean,
right, exactly. So from us, just to be clear, from us. And this is the thing that gets me about all of these debates.
Yeah.
The magic solution that everybody has is that, well, we just need to tax the government more.
Every other developed country has paid maternity leave.
But it's not magic as in like the money is coming. The money is coming from you. It's coming from us. So you're sitting here
that's how taxes work.
Yes, we should be.
A lot of people were complaining in the comments that I interrupted her a lot. And I did interrupt her a lot because, again, with Candace Owens, this was just a talking points competition. So I don't know why I would let her make one point, and then before I can debunk that point, she makes 5 more points, and then now it's my turn to speak, and then I have to figure out, am I debunking every single thing she said? Am I picking one of them, which then implicitly allows her to get away with the other stuff she said? This was kind of a shit show here because I don't think it was like productive in any way, but I don't think it was meant to be productive. I don't think she wanted to be productive. And for my intents and purposes, which is just to prove that you are a crazy person for saying that we live in a matriarchy, I think I was successful because all I had to do was show that you're being absurd.
But you're saying women should have the choice to have it all, okay? So
that's a really interesting way of putting like do you have it all right now where you're working and you're also a mother? Is that having it all?
No, I'm saying that it's not possible for women to have it all. It is impossible.
Okay, what do you have?
And that's one of the
whatever that is what I would want other women to have as well.
Behind the scenes, she wasn't really polite either. She wasn't necessarily mean, but it was clear that she wasn't really prepared for the environment, which fair enough. Like being surrounded by 20 people that don't like you probably is like a weird feeling. And it didn't really seem like she was taking it well. And at a few different moments, she seemed pretty flustered. And I think her being flustered made her double down even more into her typical like rhetorical talking point machine.
Encouraging women to give up their goods for free. Women are giving up their goods for free. Women are offering sex for free. They're being offered sex from women for free, and they're giving all of the goods up for free.
So overall, I would give her an F. And finally, we have Mr. Cenk Uygur himself.
Of course, of course!
Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Now, this one was extremely different for me because Cenk's not even a conservative. And on a lot of policy, I actually agree with him. But the topic here wasn't policy, it was populists versus, I guess, anti-populists. And the cards are kind of stacked against you when you debate a populist because by definition, their worldview is built in narrative. It's the good guys versus the bad guys. Elites versus the people. To the right wing, the elites is like Anthony Fauci and academia. And to the left wing, the elites can be like billionaires and stuff. So I just don't think populism is specific enough to actually be effective. And if you want to introduce any more complexity into that, it's very easy for them to just say, oh, you're on the villain side then, aren't you? And ultimately, that's kind of what it ended up becoming. Although with Cenk, there's the added layer of him just throwing tantrums intermittently. Banging on the table, going like this.
When is it going to get through to you?
You're not getting it. It's not clocking to you.
So we talk about the Affordable Care Act, and he says, okay, this was supposed to have a public option, but it didn't have the public option. And that proves Democrats never wanted the public option.
Democrats keep finding excuses. Why did they take the public option out of the bill?
You think Obama
Why did they
didn't
never
want the
introduce
public
the public
option?
option back again? I don't think the Democrats want the public option at all.
And you know what? That's a very appealing narrative if you don't know better.
That's because of Joe Lieberman, right? But
No,
59
brother.
other Democrats would have voted for the public
Okay, see,
option.
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And Cenk's whole argument here was like, Obama had these huge majorities. Why didn't he just bully Joe Lieberman into voting for the public option? And what he never really considered is like, if you bully someone publicly, how do you know they won't just turn against you? Well, Cenk's response, which he kept bringing up over and over again, was public approval polls.
The public option polls at over 70%. They didn't even try to pass.
But the issue that Cenk has here is he goes from saying society generally approves this type of policy to saying we can use these public opinion polls to acutely bully specific members of the Senate to vote for certain legislation. But as anyone who looks at public opinion polls knows, it's never that simple because if you poll people and ask them, should everyone have healthcare? Everyone says yes. When you say, should the government provide it? That number goes down. When you say, should we ban private insurance? That number goes down even more. And that's not to say we shouldn't have a more expensive healthcare system, but you can't just take for granted that everyone already agrees with you. I don't know a single Republican who would agree with Cenk's statement that Obamacare is a Republican plan.
A right-wing think tank, Heritage Foundation, came up with Romney Care. It's a release valve. And it's a Republican idea. Then Mitt Romney took it and passed it in Massachusetts. That's why it's called Romney Care. Then Obama and Romney ran a campaign where they pretended to be on exact opposite ends of the spectrum with the same exact healthcare plan.
He says this because the ACA has an individual mandate, which also Mitt Romney's healthcare plan had. But even calling it Mitt Romney's healthcare plan ignores the fact that Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, which is an extremely blue state with an extremely blue state legislature. To go from that to saying
Democrats and Republicans agree on economic issues
is such an insane jump that misses every single relevant detail, like the fact that not a single Republican has ever voted in favor of the ACA, that Trump repealed the individual mandate, that he just signed legislation that cuts back Medicaid, which Obamacare expanded. These are all like very relevant details that directly affect who does and doesn't have healthcare.
You say that Republicans agree with us. They agree nominally. I'll give you a great example of this. If you poll Republicans, should we cut Medicaid? They say no. When Medicaid's actually cut and you poll them, they're just cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. So like nominally, yes, everyone agrees universal healthcare is good. When you get into the nitty-gritty of actual policy, it gets a lot more complicated. I agree, Democrats should fight much harder, use the bully pulpit, campaign on these issues, but the idea that they're willfully, purposefully sabotaging themselves, some of them sure, but this is not as easy as you're painting it out to be.
The issue that I have with people like Cenk is like, if you want to get single-payer healthcare, you have to understand how the filibuster works, how political capital works, what a public opinion poll is actually telling you and what it isn't telling you. And Cenk seems to think that if he was in there, he could do it in 2 weeks.
This is not like super easy to pass. You're like, if they just all hold their hands and
I
sing
can get it passed in 2 weeks.
we're gonna get like
2
single-payer.
weeks. Okay, so here's how you do it.
Overall, I think I would give Cenk a B in our conversation because I think he was wrong, but I think rhetorically, when you just scream at someone and turn red and go like this all the time and you say like, oh, you want people to die, to a certain segment of the population that already buys into that, you're speaking their language. And then they see me and they're like, these typical establishment Democrats, they're so obsessed with process, they want us all to die broke on the streets. It's like, no, I agree with you on policy. I would just like to pass it and have it actually be a real thing. Another thing that kind of bothered me about Cenk is when I talked to him after, when the cameras were off, he said, you did really well. You made a lot of really good points. And I was like, okay, dude, why didn't you say this when we were talking in the actual back and forth conversation? I made certain good faith concessions to you.
Why do the Democrats never fight for a bill at 84%?
I think the Democrats right now are extremely spineless. We don't disagree on that.
All right, good.
But despite the fact that I found him to be frustrating to talk to and that he very clearly understood my argument but didn't admit it till after the cameras were off, he was still a nice guy. Like, I didn't feel animosity coming from him. I didn't feel animosity towards him. It was all fun for me at the end of the day with that conversation. And so I think overall, in terms of how do I feel about them and how do they do, Cenk does take the top spot here. So to kind of zoom back out now, I think my overall takeaway here is that all of these people are so different face to face than they are behind a screen, which, you know, obviously that's common sense, but like you really get a feel for it when you talk to them and you're like, wait a second, this is just another person. There's only so much they know. There's only so many arguments they've encountered. And a lot of times they've become comfortable and some of their skills have atrophied because they're in certain media circles where it's like the same talking points circulate over and over again. And when they hear something novel, they don't really know what to do with it. I will give all these people credit because it seems to be a very tough spot to be in, to be surrounded by people who kind of all hate you or at the very least disagree with you. And then having to in quick succession deal with different lines of argumentation on camera. It's no easy feat. So like on a very basic level, I will give props to all of these people for just showing up. But then I will also say these are not like masters of logic and debate in any sense. They're people who are good at rhetoric and they have audiences they have to cater to. And the combination of those two things doesn't really always lead towards truth or honesty or being able to admit when you were wrong or consider another perspective. To be fair, is that really the point of something like Jubilee Surrounded? Probably not. And there is a place for having these types of blood sport debates because you never know if someone watches something like this and they change their mind about something or they hear an argument they haven't heard before. And at the end of the day, as much as I can sit here and talk shit about these people and talk about all the flaws they had, I'm still thankful I got to speak to them because it's not very often that you get to speak to like one of the most prominent people in American politics and actually go back and forth with them. Okay, that's pretty much it. I thought this would be a fun video to kind of make because at this point I've been collecting some of the debate infinity stones. I haven't gotten Charlie Kirk yet maybe or Jordan Peterson. But if you did enjoy this video, if you want to see more from me in a long form format where it's not just quick sound bites and rhetoric and we're actually delving deeper into these issues that are facing our country, please like and subscribe down below. Check out my link tree where you can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and stay tuned for the podcast I am working on, which should be coming within the next few weeks.